to tell us about HR 1546. Mr. Carter, good to see you. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you. And first of all, let me thank the committee. Thank the committee for the opportunity to speak in support of a bill which I introduced and is now under consideration before this committee. HR 1546, the Combating Wildlife Trafficking Act. It's a critically important bill to the protection of endangered and threatened species across the globe. While this bill is before the Natural Resources Committee, the origins of this bill came from my work in the Energy and Commerce Committee. During my time on Energy and Commerce, we had spent a good deal of time focusing on big tech, especially social media sites and their effects on our lives. For all the good that these platforms have brought to our lives, they have also facilitated crimes and other harmful actions throughout our society. From drug deals to human trafficking, the internet is a new front to fight some of the worst crimes we know. This bill before you today would target one of those most tragic crimes, the trafficking of wildlife, especially endangered and threatening species. This is an issue close to my heart. I grew up a sportsman and loving the outdoors. Some of my fondest memories are fishing on the Georgia coast with my dad. I know how important it is to conserve and protect the natural resources and species around the world. These are treasures I want my grandchildren and their grandchildren to enjoy as I did. My bill builds upon the successful Eliminate, Neutralize, and Disrupt Wildlife Trafficking Act of 2016 by reauthorizing the Presidential Task Force on Wildlife Trafficking. However, it includes the important new mandate that the task force address wildlife trafficking online. To provide some background, in July 2013, President Barack Obama issued Executive Order 13648, which established a presidential task force on wildlife trafficking, co-chaired by the Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Interior, and the Attorney General. Through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, it investigates wildlife crimes, enforces wildlife laws, regulates wildlife trade, and works in partnership with the international, state, and tribal counterparts to conserve wildlife resources. Later in 2016, the task force was codified into law and is required to submit an annual report that includes updates on the national strategy for combating wildlife trafficking and identifies countries with significant levels of wildlife trafficking. The law included a sunset provision which terminated the statutory authority of the task force on October 7th of 2021. My bill reauthorizes the task force through October 7th of 2026. As I mentioned before, the bill requires the task force to develop recommendations and establish a working group to address wildlife trafficking on the internet. The Department of State and the U.S. Agency for International Development are also required to develop a strategy for engaging with internet and social media companies to address wildlife trafficking on their platforms. We've made great strides to combat wildlife trafficking, but it is essential that we expand these efforts to stop trafficking facilitated all too easily by the internet. I would like to thank Representative John Garamendi from California for being the Democrat lead on this important bill. I also want to thank the subcommittee for considering the bill at today's hearing. It's been introduced last Congress, but did not receive a hearing, so I'm pleased that we can bring much needed attention to this issue. I believe this is common sense and bipartisan bill that will go a long way in combating wildlife trafficking in the 21st century. I want to thank the subcommittee again for allowing me the opportunity to speak on this bill, and I hope you will soon report it favorably so we may further preserve species around the globe. As I said, Mr. Chairman, this is a very important bill, something that I take very seriously. I do appreciate the indulgence of the committee. I appreciate your consideration, and I hope that the bill will move forward. Thank you, and I yield back.